Tom is not with us, but I will talk to him. First thing, I'm just going to follow the agenda, which starts out with some ATM articles from the Open Space Committee. And Tom is on that committee, but I can explain what each of the articles refers to. We want to talk about our own strategy for the town meeting. Some future plans for NRAB. Want to talk about ponds. Wanted to talk about reviewing our charter. And Herb raised the issue that the National Park Service seems to be saying that they're going to have to pull back from some environmental activities. We'd like to talk about that briefly and where we should get, how we should proceed to get more information. The minutes of April 22nd need approval, and then we need to talk about the next meeting, which will actually be a complicated conversation. The two open space ATM articles refer to taking town-owned properties and putting them under the control and management of the Conservation Commission. One of the particles, map 30-188, is in Upper Blackfish Creek. It's something it's one of the marsh particles that you see off the west side as you drive across Blackfish Creek on Route 6. The other particle, map 42-137, is also a marsh connected to other marshes. It's on just off Bayberry Lane, which is on the south side, just as you begin to cross over onto Lieutenant Island. So I think these are both protecting marshes. I think these are both non-controversial properties. And I would like a motion that we go ahead and recommend approval of both of them to the town meeting, which is what the vote is about. If anyone wants to ask some questions or discuss, I'll be glad to do the best I can, or we can postpone this to our next meeting.
I'm in favor of Conscom taking them over.
Okay. Could
So
we turn that? Could we? So moved. And I think we'll take both of them together on one vote. Is there a second?
I second it.
Then let me call the roll. Laura,
Yes.
Herb,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So we have approved this 4-0. As I say, they're pretty non-controversial. I had included in your package, I hope you got it, some write-ups about the two articles which we have on the town warrant, one having to do with the dredging alternative, one having to do with the what we call the harbor survey. That's redoing the Curley report. I met earlier this afternoon with the Conservation Commission. They approved and supported both of those articles, and we're really quite pleased to see them. So I was encouraged about that. What I had written and sent around is the start of two different pathways. The first pathway is to produce a document or an explanation that could be handed out at town meeting. The rules of the town meeting, which is on June 26th this year, is that you won't be able to show any slides at the town meeting, but handouts would be allowed. Those handouts have to be to Rebecca Eldridge at Town Hall before the middle of June. So I would like to ask each of you to look at what I had written and come back at our next meeting with suggestions on how you would like this to be an explanation that would be appropriate to hand out to people at town meeting. The second thing I wanted to do with the outline I wrote and sent around is to begin to turn that into requests for proposals, because once town meeting, if they do approves either or both of these articles, we still have to find somebody to do the work. And that's a process of request for proposal. There is the assistant town manager, her name is Rebecca, and Rebecca Slick, I think. I'm embarrassed if I got the second name wrong, but I've got the first one right. I've met with her, and she's very supportive of the process and has a number of good ideas. So I'm going to work with her about creating requests for proposals, which we could send out as soon as we're approved at town meeting, assuming we are. So that, please think about that document, and particularly in terms of any suggestions about what we could hand out at town meeting. Because until we get the vote at town meeting, all the other work doesn't count. There's one other thing I have been thinking of, and that is I might go to the Provincetown Independent and see if they'd be willing to do a interview. And I was thinking, and take advice on this one way or the other, that I might want to do this interview together with Steve Swain. He runs the jewelry and art shop, which is right next to the Pearl Restaurant. And he has a different idea on how to take care of the black custard. He wants to dredge it and turn it into fertilizer, and it's evidently has some benefit. My view is I wish him all the best. He wishes us the best. It would be good for the town to have some alternatives in order to replace the current dredging system. But I think if both of us were there together, the main thing it would do is reinforce that the idea that this is a practical project, that we're a practical and necessary project that we're undertaking. But I would take advice on that one way or the other. I think having the handout at ATM makes all kinds of sense. And if we agree about that, I'd like everyone's ideas, but particularly I think I'd like John Dwayne to write the one on the Curley report, because he's done a lot of that work himself, and I'll try to flesh out the dredging alternative. So we have the two documents in something like a final form by the time of our next meeting. So that's a long monologue. I'd be interested in any thoughts or comments.
Sounds like a good approach, John. I think trying to get something in the paper is a good idea too, if you can pull that off.
Well, I know the editors, so I call them up and say, you know, can we go? And I think having Steve present too would be fair and useful.
The, I was looking up I couldn't remember the name of it, Milorganite. You ever heard of Milorganite?
Yep.
It's a fertilizer that's produced from the waste of Milwaukee. And we've used it. I mean, it's a popular brand out there. This is something.
I think it's been forbidden in some places though, because there were some contaminants in it.
I think it either jacks the nitrogen or the phosphorus too. I can't remember which one.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it being, maybe it might have been banned. I just Googled it. I didn't find that.
We've used it too and we survived, but
Yeah, because I assume if we wanted to turn ours black mayonnaise into that, what you're really talking about is selling it to somebody who will do it, or having somebody haul
yes,
it away who will do it.
absolutely. And I think Steve has some contacts toward that end.
That might be a possibility. There was, I'm aware of it because as a New Yorker, there was a almost humorous situation where no company or any state would take New York's waste because it's just an assumption of contamination. That's true. It was a major story a couple of years ago. But I remember the deal then was trying to find somebody who would haul it away for nothing, or at best, or perhaps pay you for it. But I think that would have to be our goal here. Unless Steve, I mean, it'd be interesting to hear what Steve has to say, but I would assume that would have to be the assumption.
Yeah, that's basically his program.
Yeah. Well,
John, are you willing to undertake the writing of a page for an ATM handout having to do with the Curley report?
Yeah, so I kind of played around with that one that she sent to us, and it's mostly very good. So I think I'm pretty much ready to go with that. Did I send a copy of this? I'm looking at it right now with some changes in red. Did you guys all get that, or did I just send that to you, John?
No, I got it with just some corrections, right? It was grammatical.
Yeah, it had corrections in it, and it had like a couple of sentences added: commercial fishing and shellfishing. And then one sentence at the end of the paragraph about at completion of this work, there was a sentence about presenting the results at the State of Wellfleet Harbor Conference. You know, I didn't real. So this is the idea of this. This was to be handed out at town meeting. I also put a link in there, so I don't know. Is this going to be electronically available to people before the meeting, or is this simply it's a printed handout for people?
That's a good question. I'd have to ask Rebecca Eldridge. I don't know the answer.
All right, because it's got a link in it. I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. I thought that what you wrote was very good, and like I said, I'm willing to pretty much go with it.
Okay.
The idea being is that once stage one is complete, there is a possibility for follow-up work, which is, as far as I'm concerned, could be the 10-year follow-up or whatever's recommended. Does that make sense?
I think what I'd like to do is maybe ask Herb and Laura, and I would do the same thing, is take what John has done and what I will do and hand it to your spouse. Because we've talked about these projects for a number of times, so we sort of know how to read between the lines. And I'd like to get some feedback. Maybe I'll go to some friends who live down the road, get some feedback from people who haven't been involved in this for some time, and see if they understand it and if it sells them, if it's doing a good job of selling. And I guess some of that feedback may be more useful than things that we might think of ourselves.
I'll do it. Happy to do it.
So,
And if she, I'll pass on any edits based on it.
right. So,
All right, well, I've got this document that's got red ink in it, and I can just turn this all into black and send it around for you guys.
let's do that, and I'll do something on the dredging alternative, get that sent around, and we'll meet again in early June.
So, yeah, the point I'm getting at is with the way you worded it, it says, you know, based on the recommendations from stage 1, additional harbor studies may be undertaken. So that pretty much covers follow-up studies. You know, if they say this should be done every 10 years, it gives us a kind of a, you know, we have, you know, pre-permission to do another report in 10 years or 5 years or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah.
All right, I'll take this and circulate it around everybody.
Good.
Good.
I'll get something as soon as I can. By the way, I said that our next meeting would be in early June. Linda and I will be out of pocket pretty much until June 5th. We have a trip planned to Pennsylvania for some birding, which is a long-standing plan, and then our granddaughter is graduating from high school on June the 5th. So my priorities are quite willingly directed toward her. That's the youngest one, so that 4 for
Nice.
4. Future plans for NRAB. Ponds. We have been doing a lot of work over the past 2-3 years on the harbor. We did do a ponds plan a few years ago, and I think there's enough interest in ponds that we should undertake an update. It's particularly helpful that we have now 2 members, Laura and Herb, who actually live on ponds, and Long Pond and
Oh,
Go.
Gull Pond. Laura and Herb, if I don't think we'll actually be able to get to this on as an agenda item until maybe about July. But I would like the 2 of you to begin to set out an agenda for us. What we should be talking about, who we should be inviting, what we think the key issues are. So we'll take your knowledge and background to give us a running start.
Laura, you can do it.
yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone know, do we know whether or not the seashore has begun, has started again to do their monitoring of the ponds? They stopped it for 2 years. I guess under budget cuts. It's really-
I do not know. You either have to ask Sophia, or I could ask.
I'll ask Sophia, because I had asked her earlier and she didn't know at that time because it depended on the budget. But it's been a real shame that they broke a link going back to the mid-80s of statistics and analyses on these ponds.
I certainly hope they have restarted.
If they haven't, then that's really, I think, would become an issue for us.
I think we would certainly beat the drums and that's something that needs to happen.
Especially when there's some critical elements now, such as my greatest concern is water temperature in the ponds. And how rapidly is it increasing?
While we're bringing the Park Service into the equation, you had raised in an email with me a concern about, I guess, their capacity to continue some of their programs.
This is a front page article in the New York Times today.
Mhm.
It was about a policy change
Okay,
in the National Park Service related to all the parks. And it's a major change in that the policy of the parks up till now has been National Park Service maintain nature as it has been. And that policy has now changed to accept that that is no longer practical, that they have to now both manage change that is inevitable. And the example they gave was in Acadia National Park, where there's invasive brush that's killing out other vegetation, and particularly some of the trees. And it's struck a chord here because our discussion with the National Seashore has always been about Phragmites, because Phragmites are an invasive plant. And for the seashore, there are no weeds in ponds. There are only indigenous plants and invasive plants. And the seashore will have nothing to do with any concern about an indigenous plant. But they have been aggressive in going after invasive plants. And if I can send that article to the rest of you if you haven't seen it, or it's retrievable from the Times. It seems to be that the policy now would be, of the National Seashore, any park would be an analysis of what they think they can reasonably deal with in climate change and what they think they're just going to have to let go. That's a major change.
I found it a depressing article, Herb.
Did you read it?
I
It was
did,
depressing.
yeah,
It was depressing.
yeah.
It was disturbing. Very disturbing article.
Because I thought that means that all of us who live on ponds are now first responders in terms of if we see stuff, if they're not going to do anything about it in a way.
Well, I think we should have a dialogue with them and see what,
Yeah,
if we can get through to them to have someone commit as to how that's, because it is a policy that applies to all the parks. How does
that's
that
right.
administered in this park? What are the changes?
But the impact of water quality on ponds could be huge, so.
Good, good.
one of the things
Yeah.
I'm
Not that the entire report, that 80-page report that they came up with, I started reading it, and it sounds practical it sounded like a government publication for sure, but it did address the fact that they're not going to be able to preserve everything like they were 50 years ago, because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I thought that that thing about Acadia with all that brush that's going to take over if the spruce forests go away was pretty powerful for the folks up there. I think what it's going to mean is that it's going to make citizen action, citizen involvement pretty key to protecting what we have here.
Yes,
Yes. Yep. Citizen, maybe even civic. In the sense of the-
one thing that occurs to me, we might try to do, say, for the July meeting, is I know Jeff Sanders. He's the head of natural resources for the seashore. He and I worked together on a committee that gives donations to young scientists. So I could ask him to join us, and maybe by July he would be able to talk about some of the practicalities in implementing this project. So I've made a note to myself about that, and that might be a useful follow-up. He would also be a good person to lobby for adequate research on the ponds, adequate monitoring and research on the ponds. Third thing I wanted to do, and I would ask you all, is to read our charter, the charter of the committee. And I would like sometime in the future to talk about updating it. The charter was written back in 1995, 25 years, things have changed. For example, the word ponds does not appear in the charter. The charter assumes that we're only concerned with the harbor. And I think that's a too narrow view of what we could do. So if you have a chance, look at our webpage, pull down the charter, and think about what changes we might want to make in it. The other one that occurs to me is that it implies that in some way, shape, or form, the Shellfish Department or the Shellfish Advisory Board reports to the Natural Resource Advisory Board. I think that's way out of date. That may have been necessary in 1995, but that's way out of date now. Minutes from last April. We had a chance to review those. Any corrections or discussions?
I looked at them and don't remember now.
I have nothing on it.
I would like a vote to, a motion to approve, if that's,
I'll make that motion.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
Laura,
Approved.
John,
Yes.
Herb,
Approved.
and myself. Great. I'd like to think about the date and time of our next meeting, and it's an interesting situation. The Comprehensive Wastewater Committee has a couple of important articles on town meeting warrant. And they're the committee that is working on managing the amount of nitrogen which is in Wellfleet Harbor. That goes back to our harbor management plan of 2006. That was a plan which, along with other factors, really brought to the forefront that we needed to deal with the nitrogen excess in the harbor. So now the Comprehensive Wastewater Committee has got an action plan. They would like to talk with us. I would like to hear them. I would like to go back to them with a suggestion of some dates and times in early June. But of course, I understand that we don't know quite what our schedule is going to be. You know, I'm retired, I'm free as a bird, but some of you guys are still working. Do you feel comfortable in being able to say at this point, maybe pick out a couple of dates that and times that you think would be free, or should I wait until I get back on June 5th and ask, put the question then? I think Laura, particularly, you're the one that's most likely not to be
yeah,
able to make a commitment.
Do you have a sense of what time of day it would be, John?
I would say either late afternoon, say 4 o'clock, or 6 o'clock in the evening.
Okay, that helps.
You know, and of course, the thing that makes me wonder about the process is it'd be a lot of there. It has to work for
For everybody.
for Kurt, and he's going to want to bring Scott Horsley along with him, I think. So it's a question of their schedules as well.
Laura, do you have any days now that you can look at June and say, oh, that doesn't work?
The 8th is bad.
The 8th is what day? Which day?
It's a Tuesday. That's not great.
Pull up a calendar.
Thursdays, I have a recurring thing in the afternoon, but I'm clear on it by 3:30. Are you talking about a Zoom one, John, or an in-person with masks?
Zoom.
Zoom, okay.
It's got to be before June 15th then.
So that week of the 7th isn't bad for me, other than the 8th is not good late afternoon. And as long as it's after 3:30 on the 10th, that would work too.
Why
So
don't I go back and tentatively suggest the 10th, either at 4 or 6, and see.
I prefer 6 or 6:30 as just a matter of practice in the summertime.
Okay. So we'll say Thursday as a first trial,
Yeah, sure.
Thursday, June 10th at 6 or 6:30.
Yeah.
See how that works.
I have unretired myself. I don't know that how relevant that is. I'm retired from work, but in our retirement, Bobby and I run a foundation. We mentor low-income college students to get them through college.
Yeah,
In New York, mostly from Harlem and
yeah,
and
good. That sounds like a great thing
we've
to do.
it is, and we've been on hold on it for a year, doing it via Zoom.
Right.
It's always been better to deal with college people face to face.
Absolutely.
And oddly enough, June is a very busy month for us, but I can work around it. It's a very busy month because they're coming off one school year and we've got to get them ready to go into the next school year, which is, there's always financial, academic, housing issues to deal with. But that's why I want to know, with advance notice, I can work around it. And pretty much from here on in, we're going to be going back and forth to New York.
Would you think it helpful if I were to suggest to Kurt 2 dates, maybe Thursday the 10th and Thursday the 17th, with the times that John suggested, 6 or 6:30, and that gives a couple options, and it might make it easier for Kurt.
Okay, we're willing, we just were told that a Zoom, you can't have a Zoom meeting after the 15th.
Right, so we're gonna do it before, oh, right, the 17th is after the,
17th is after.
Yeah.
Well, let me think. All right, Kurt's here in town. Scott doesn't live here. He lives at the under end of the Cape. We'll start a dialogue and see how it plays out.
Okay, be wonderful if we could get a read on whether or not a phone call, a call into a meeting is acceptable. If one can place a vote, legitimate vote that way.
There must be some way that we could get someone like Scott on a screen.
Yeah.
I'll have to talk to Rebecca Aldrich about this. If it isn't one thing, it's another. But in
You
principle,
can't have town meetings by Zoom anymore after the 15th, is that right?
that's what Mia was saying.
Huh. Well,
We're
we
going-
could always, a conference
That
call.
because I guess what happens is a state of emergency goes away, and when the state of emergency goes away, we have to go back to doing what we used to do.
Okay.
I'll talk to Kurt. Let's see what we can work out. But at least a Thursday in the early evening sounds like a good starting point.
Yeah.
Great. Look forward to your feedback on things for the ATM. Think about ponds, think about charter. I'll think about getting Jeff Sanders to talk to us about both the ponds and the Park Service issues. We've taken care of the Open Space Committee. Guess we're good to go. Supper time. Move to adjourn.
I move.
Let's do it.
Okay. Thank you all for your participation.
I'll figure out what's up with my Zoom next time.
Okay.